Perhaps the most intriguing feature of the entire Alvarez-Wyckoff experiment is this. At the time he undertook to study the film for us, Charles Wyckoff was unaware that there was anything unusual about frame 186 of the Zapruder film. He tentatively placed one shot there only because of Mr. Zapruder's slight jiggle. Yet, in the Warren Commission report, we learn that to a gunman tracking from the book depository, the President's head would have come into view for an instant through a hole in the foliage just at frame 186, where now appears something startled Abraham Zapruder. If a shot had been squeezed off there, a shot which missed, the length of time available to Oswald begins to stretch, even if the Commission's clock is right. The Warren report placed the first shot at frame 210. But now that brings up a second question. Was the clock right? You'll recall that the Zapruder film is the basic clock for all of these events. Now, tests of the camera made by the FBI, a camera like this one, reported that it was running at an average speed of 18.3 frames per second. The camera had been obtained from the Bell & Howell Company, the manufacturers. During our CBS investigation, we asked the company if they had tested the camera speed. The result was a public announcement that they had tested it, and the result was the same as the FBI test. And the announcement continued that they had that day donated the camera to the National Archives, and this is it. But if the clock was not exactly right, then the whole sequence of events, from the number of shots to the time span of the shots and many other things, would be affected. Curiously, most of the critics themselves accepted the 18.3 speed without question, except one, who insists it was running at 24 frames, as could have happened if the control had been depressed. Now, we decided to see if we could clock the clock. We turned again to photo expert Charles Wyckoff.
We have a clock over here with a sweep second hand, and if we photograph that clock with each one of these cameras, we will be able to measure the time that it takes to run through few hundred frames as we've shown here. And I will try this for you right now. What I'll do is to turn the light on to illuminate the clock dial, start the camera, and then start the clock and let it run for about a 10 or 15 second period.
And you do that with each camera?
We do that with each camera, and then we take the film out, process it, from each record, and we end up with a result very similar to what you see on this chart right here. This corresponds to the first camera. This is the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. We started each frame here, we edited until we got the frame corresponding to 0 time on each one of the cameras. Then we counted off the same number of frames on each camera record that corresponded to frames 190 to 318 in the Zapruder record.
And there was this much difference in the cameras, although they were the same kind of cameras?
Same kind of cameras. There was this much difference in time. The first camera read 6.90 seconds, the second camera 7.30 seconds, the third 6.70, the fourth 8.35, and the last 6.16 seconds.
So under this theory, the shooter or shooters of the shots could have had up to how many seconds to fire?
They could have had, according to this, up as much as 8 3/35 of a second, which is a pretty long time.
In this hour, we have been considering the relationship between Oswald and the assassination. To the account given in the Warren report, we have made 3 additions, each of which rests on evidence at least as persuasive as any provided by the Commission. Our analysis of the Zapruder film suggests strongly that the first shot was fired at frame 186. The Commission said only that the first shot to hit came between frames 210 and 225. Something startled Mr. Zapruder earlier, and the evidence is that a rifle shot was what startled him. We have shown that the Zapruder camera was quite possibly running slower than the Commission thought. The earlier shot and the slow camera together mean that the rifleman may have had additional time to get off 3 shots. We have shown by carefully controlled experiments that a Mannlicher Carcano rifle can be fired more rapidly and accurately than the Commission believed. Now, these points strengthen the Warren report's basic finding. They make it more likely that Oswald shot the President. They significantly weaken a central contention of the critics, their contention that Oswald could not have done it because he did not have enough time to fire. It is now reasonable to assume that the first shot, fired through a tree, missed its mark, and that it was this shot that Governor Connolly heard. The governor has insisted all along that he was not struck by the first shot. It now appears he was correct. Now we can answer all our secondary questions. Did Oswald own a rifle? He did. Did Oswald take a rifle to the book depository building? He did. Where was Oswald when the shot? In the building, on the 6th floor. Was Oswald's rifle fired from the building? It was. How many shots were fired? 3. How fast could Oswald's rifle be fired? Fast enough. What was the time span of the shots? 7 or 8 seconds. Did Lee Harvey Oswald shoot President Kennedy? CBS News concludes that he did. Yet this is only the beginning of our inquiry. We drew the distinction between Oswald as a killer and Oswald as the killer. The Warren Commission, despite the most widely accepted and often restated capsule version of its findings, did not state that Oswald was the only killer. It did state that it could not find any evidence that others had conspired with him. Yet it is on precisely this point that most Americans question the Commission's conclusion most strongly. Almost 2 out of 3 Americans seem to feel that behind such a monstrous deed, there must have been a conspiracy. Tomorrow night, we'll be back at this same time with Dan Rather and Eddie Barker in Dealey Plaza when we consider the question, was there a conspiracy?
This has been the first of a series, a CBS News inquiry, The Warren Report. The second part will appear tomorrow night at this same time. This broadcast has been produced under the supervision and control of CBS News.
Candid Camera and What's My Line will return next Sunday evening at their regular times on most of these stations. This is CBS.